2009, the Junior World Player of the Year class. We've already looked at Winston Stanley, who was one of the nominees for that Junior World Player of the Year award in another video. I'll link that in the corner. But for this one, we're going to be looking at Richard Kingi, who back in that 2009 class was also one of the nominees for Junior World Player of the Year. Obviously, he missed out to Aaron Cruden, who was the eventual winner of that award. And I think of the four guys who were initially nominated, probably the winner in terms of who's had the best career. But we're going to look at Richard Kingi today. He's a New Zealand-born Australian player, moved to Australia age 15, eked out a bit of a career over in Australia, went to Europe, had a bit of a health scare, and is now seemingly flourishing in a coaching career. But he was a scrum half, so halfback. And also a bit of a utility back, could play wing from time to time, I think fullback, but mostly kind of 9 was the preferred jersey for him. He had kind of, from what I gather, I don't remember a heck of a lot about Richard Kingi. I remember he was kind of pretty fleet-footed, like his stepping was the main thing that kind of set him apart from other halfbacks, and the fact that he played wing as well kind of gives you an indication, if you don't remember him, kind of what style of halfback he was. But he starts off with a real whirlwind. 2009, he's playing Aussie Sevens. He's playing for Sunnybank Club Rugby. He's playing under-20s rugby for the Wallabies. He's also a scaffolder by day because he's got 3 kids. He's age 20. He's got 3 kids to support, so he's got food to put on the table, working as a scaffolder and continuing his rugby stuff. Pretty bloody full-on for a guy only 20 years of age. From that under-20s set of performances, he does get that nomination for Junior World Player of the Year, and I guess that kind of starts the snowball effect early on in his career, because that leads to an academy contract for the Reds. He gets a couple of caps for the Reds. Remember, the Reds at that time have got Will Guinea as their 9, so it's not exactly an easy place to just kind of walk in and get free minutes. But he gets a couple of caps from the bench. And then, interestingly, gets a Wallabies call-up from Robbie Deans. I guess kind of seen as a hot prospect that they wanted to maybe blood early. So he goes on tour with the Wallabies in 2009. Doesn't get any test caps, but does get 1 non-test cap against Cardiff Blues for the Wallabies. So it's all a bit of a whirlwind, man. From a scaffolder to a Wallabies guy. All within a pretty short space of time, seemingly. But that was the only time he would play for the Wallabies. So he doesn't get any test caps. But he represents the Wallabies in that one game. He does get called up to the Wallabies again in 2010, but doesn't get any game time and is kind of, I think, released to go do pre-season with his new club. So he leaves the Reds after getting 5 caps in a couple of seasons with them. As I mentioned, kind of down the pecking order a wee bit, especially with Will Guinea there. But he goes to the Rebels, spends a few years down in Melbourne. It's a bit of a tumultuous time from memory with the Melbourne Rebels back in those days. They had Danny Cipriani signed. I think they signed Kurtley Beale. James O'Connor might have been there. I remember they didn't have a very good forward pack, but they had a bunch of flashy backs, and Richard Kingi was kind of one of their signings that went down there. 30-odd caps in those seasons, like I mentioned. I think he had a bit of time off with injuries as well. Also, the fact that Nick Phipps was kind of coming through the ranks as well at the same time. I think Nick Phipps, from memory, ended up being the main guy for the Rebels in those kind of few years that Nick Phipps was there as well, because him and Richard Kingi were kind of there at the same time. So, it kind of goes from a whirlwind potential Wallabies prospect to solid Super Rugby squad player, which is pretty good for a guy who was a couple of years ago only working a day job like the rest of us. And attracts the attention eventually of Stade Francais. So another kind of payday, I would imagine. As I mentioned, going from academy contract, full-time Super Rugby player to a contract over play in Paris. A bit of a whirlwind continues. I don't remember his career at all. I wasn't following any European rugby, certainly not a club rugby, in 2013, 2014. But he goes over there. By his own admission, he has a pretty good first season with Stade Francais. But in his second season during the pre-season, he gets pneumonia. And he's got a video on on YouTube as well, where he basically talks through it, where he says he felt crook but didn't want to get treatment because he just thought he had a cough and a sore back, and he kind of felt the need to kind of be a bit tough and not really call out for too much help. So he kind of left it, and it got to the point where he was coughing up blood, decided to not go to training, and then eventually had to be hospitalized and put into a coma because he had double pneumonia, whatever that means, and liver failure, and had a minor stroke. And yeah, it all got really fast for not getting that medical treatment earlier, I guess. But as he mentions in his kind of clip, that, you know, I guess back in those days it was you don't seek out the treatment if it's something kind of not too serious, and he didn't want to let his teammates down. So he ends up being hospitalized, man. There's some pretty brutal video of him just staggering because he's half paralyzed inside of his body from the stroke. He can barely walk. His missus, bless her, is kind of helping him get through it. He has to go through a rehab process. Takes him 6 months to get able to walk again, and then another year and a half, and he's back playing rugby. So no surprises, that was the end of his kind of Stade Francais career, and for the most part the end of his professional rugby career, only by the age like 25. Goes through rehab, like I mentioned, for a year and a half, 2 years. Does get back to playing a bit of club rugby. I think he was with the Tasman Mako for a while. I don't think he played for their first team, but he played for the kind of high performance team. Played club rugby in Australia. Did play a few professional games for one of the Russian clubs, Enisei, who I don't know anything about, unfortunately. But yeah, and then eventually kind of heads back to Australia to work as a coach. So the playing days kind of gets cut short, man, at 25 years old due to a big old health scare. I mean, he'll be, I guess, saying that he's lucky to be alive in the scheme of things. It's not that often you get a stroke, liver failure from pneumonia and whatnot, and are still able to kind of, you know, coach rugby and run around as normal. Like, he looks in pretty good shape from the video I've seen him now that he's in his kind of early 30s. But yeah, he runs a coaching clinic now. King's, what was it called? King's Training? It's over in Queensland. Richard Kingi's Rugby Academy, something like that. But yeah, he's a rugby coach associated with one of the universities over there, and he's got his own kind of rugby club training thing where he seems to work with teenagers and young kids, and you know, go through skills drills, passing, and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, Richard Kingi, another one of that 2009 class, Junior Rugby Player of the Year nominee. Yeah, as I mentioned with kind of Winston Stanley, that's still a pretty bloody impressive CV compared to most people who try their hands at rugby. So yep, that's Richard Kingi. I think next time we'll have a look at Cal Ferns and eventually get on to the little big man, Aaron Cruden himself. But yeah, 2009 class, part 2. If you have any memories of Richard Kingi, do let us know in the comments. Like I mentioned, I only really remember him with his kind of sidestepping, being a real kind of fleet-footed, hard-to-bring down guy. But as I mentioned, I've also watched a bit of him kind of post-rugby career, and he seems like he's yeah, he's loving the rugby stuff. So good on him, man. And yeah, cheers, guys. I will talk to you soon. See you later.